Hi everyone, I'm Lauren. I currently work as a Korean research associate at a private company in the Philippines. On the side, I also work as a Korean language instructor at a private university in Quezon City. And I'm also the creator of 5 Minute Korean, which is a Korean learning channel.
I am known as Yen Chua. I teach Korean in the Department of Linguistics in the University of the Philippines, Niliman. I teach their undergrad classes as well as extramural classes. And aside from that, I also teach Korean at Verbhive. Verbhive is like an online platform of language enthusiasts. The first time I got to know Korean, like fangirl life, began 2009, 2010, around that time. I was high school and nobody, sorry, during that era. So basically, it's the second generation K-pop. Through that, I was really a big fan of Super Juniors. I started to learn how to write Hangul, the Korean alphabet, writing the names of my favorite Super Junior members. So, but as for the formal start of classes, it's really 2013 when I got into college. Tapos I majored in linguistics, and one of the requirements of our program is that we needed to learn languages. So I picked Mandarin, Chinese, and Korean. So basically 8 years now. So I'm still studying. Of course, it doesn't end and it never stops. Even though I am already teaching now, learning never stops.
I was first introduced to Korean, I think, back in 2014, about 7 years ago. Throughout the years, it was also, varying intensity of how much I study, varying volume of what I study, and also varying materials of what I'm interested in. If we talk about like formal studies, I did about 3 years of studying Korean, or actually enrolling in a language program, a language course. Like a year within that 3 years, it was spent in Annyeong University, so that's in Nonsan in Korea. I started my Korean learning journey in UP Diliman.
I attended classes, undergraduate classes in UP.
About one whole semester of Korean language studies. I wasn't really interested in Korean back then. It was mostly for being able to graduate and doing it as part of my curriculum.
And then I applied for a exchange scholarship program. Actually, that was the first step. So in 2014, I went to Kangwon National University.
So I did a year of student exchange program in Daejeondae, or Daejeon University. It was focused mostly on social sciences, but at least we had one Korean class every week.
Then after that, I came back to the Philippines, finished my studies. I still didn't stop to learn Korean, to speak Korean. So I still found ways on how I can practice my Korean. So when there were exchange students from Korea sa school, sa university, I always talk to them in Korean. Also, syempre, the Korean drama watching never stops. So I also learned Korean there until I was able to secure a scholarship. That was 2017. I applied for the KGSP scholarship.
KGSP is the Korean Government Scholarship Program, a program by the government where they send students to Korea to study for their undergraduate, for master's program, or PhD.
I applied for Korean language education because I really wanted to teach Korean as well. So when I got in, meron kaming training. So it's like 6 months to 1 year Korean language learning in Daegu University naman. So from Chuncheon to Daegu. So Daegu, I stayed there for 6 months, and then the master's program was in Korea University. So yes, Korea University, I finished my degree in 2 years. 2020, I got my degree, saktong-sakto lang for the COVID. And then I went back home. Tapos ayun na, lockdown na. So actually, a Super Junior talaga nagsimula na. Although, they're not the main reason now. Pero during that time, really, I wanted to understand the variety shows na walang subs, na guest ni Super Junior. So that was the fangirl life back then, no? That was until I went for the exchange scholarship where I got to know many friends, Korean friends, and as much as possible, I want to lessen the language barrier when talking to them. Kasi iba pa rin talaga when you talk to them in Korean kaysa, you're going to get connected by the English English language. You get to talk to them heart to heart if you learn their language. I wanted to share that one, yung fun na naramdaman ko when I was learning Korean to other Filipino people as well.
So initially, I just started learning Korean because I had to. So it was part of the curriculum during my undergraduate. And when I started living in Korea, it was mostly survival. So people didn't really speak much English, especially if you're outside Seoul. I tried living outside those big cities. Nonsan City is known for, a city where a lot of the elderly live. So not a lot of them would speak English. So I think mostly it was also a motivation of, how will I survive if I don't even know how to order online or how to call the ajushi. Again, it was out of need. I think if you ask me what made you want to continue learning the language, it was mostly because through my experience in Korea, what I realized is that language skills is actually a very, very good investment. I've seen a lot of opportunities that will open up for me if I still continue learning the language in employment. So if you see, there's a lot of bilingual recruitment agencies nowadays because there's a growing demand for them. At least here in the Philippines, your basic salary, it would add a language premium on top of that. And I also saw the opportunity in taking part in what people are interested in. So that's also how the 5-Minute Korean was born. What I wanted to do with 5-Minute Korean was, of course, firstly to share my knowledge, especially in terms of how we connect language and culture.
The first step is to really start. Okay, to start, if you really want to learn Korean, start. Kung self-study man yan or you want to enroll sa isang institution, that's the first step to really start on it. So if you're really, contemplating about it, if you have more time this pandemic, like why not invest that time on you?
We set our goals. So why are you studying Korean? So is it for work? Is it for K-pop? Is it for culture? Or just interested about, Korean songs and entertainment?
The second one is know what's best for you. When you start kasi, you get to figure out how you learn as a learner. So ano ka ba? Are you more of visual learner? Do you learn more when you're watching dramas? So mas verbal ka ba? You can't learn this from other people. You need to discover it by yourself.
Try to achieve not only studying by book but also immersion. I think the best way is actually going to Korea and living in Korea. There's a lot of scholarships, there's a lot of programs, but if that is not possible, especially now since there's pandemic, I think the second best way is to be able to converse or interact with the Korean natives. There's actually a lot of services actually online. I think I know italki or maybe just Facebook groups. And if that still is not possible for you, there's a lot of organizations in the Philippines that are catering Korean learners as well. Let's say you have TCC, you have HALUP, you have UP Arirang, and I think in Ateneo they also have a Blue Hanbok Society. And I remember one vlogger saying that what helped him with his accent, with a Korean accent, was to listen to podcasts. Did he understand the podcast 100%? No, that wasn't the intention of listening. His intention was to pick up some words and be able to understand how the Korean accent works. And I think that also helped me in trying to gain my confidence in speaking the language and also trying to speak and sound like a Korean.
And the third one, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Okay lang kahit magkamali ka. Hindi ka naman nila pagtatawanan. Koreans, they're very warm people. They really get touched. Actually, isang Annyeong haseyo pa lang. Sabi mo, wow, you're very good in Korean. And they really get touched if, you're studying their language. I think that also applies for us Filipinos na kapag, di ba, may foreigner na nagfi-Filipino, parang, wow, super matatouch ka pa. Bakit mo pinag-aaralan yung language namin? So, ganun din sila. Don't be conscious if you make mistakes. That's always what I tell my students. So once you get afraid, you get very apprehensive. Hindi, dun ka na magsa-stop eh. You're never gonna learn. If nagkamali ka, na-correct ka, actually, mas matatandaan mo pa yun na na-correct mo. So yan, get started. Know what's the best for you and don't be afraid to make mistakes.